On Christmas Day, 1991, the world watched something no one had ever seen before. A nuclear superpower quietly disappearing. No bombs, no invasions, no final battle, just a single moment. The Soviet flag lowered over the Kremlin. And suddenly, the country that terrified the world for 45 years was gone. People across the USSR stood in grocery lines staring at empty shelves, asking the same question. How does a superpower collapse like this? Most empires fall with cannon fire, revolutions, or epic last stands. But the Soviet Union, one of the most powerful states in human history, didn't collapse with a bang. It collapsed with confusion, with economic breakdown, with political freefall, with millions of people simply refusing to live under the old system anymore. Between 1989 and 1991, the world watched something absolutely surreal. A nuclear superpower dissolving, a military giant losing control, a political machine spinning apart, and the United States almost accidentally becoming the only superpower left on Earth. This wasn't just the end of the Cold War. This was the birth of a new world order, one the world still hasn't figured out. To understand why the Soviet Union collapsed, you gotta rewind to the 1970s and early 80s. The USSR looked strong from the outside. Huge military, intimidating parades, nuclear arsenal, communist allies across the globe. But inside, the Soviet system was cracking. Factories were outdated. Production was slow. Food shortages were constant. People waited hours for bread. Everyday life felt heavy, gray, controlled. The government hid the truth, but the people living through it knew something was wrong. Then came the Soviet-Afghan War, a disaster that drained billions of dollars, destroyed morale, and shattered the myth that the Red Army was invincible. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet economy was sinking fast. People weren't inspired by communist ideology anymore. They were tired, frustrated, and ready for change. Enter Mikhail Gorbachev, a young, energetic leader who believed the Soviet Union could be saved. He introduced two radical reforms: glasnost, openness, real talk, transparency, no more lies; perestroika, restructuring the economy, modernizing the system. Brave ideas, but risky ones. When you open windows in a storm, things get blown apart. The first big crack in the Soviet system came not in Moscow, but in Berlin. East Germany was one of the USSR's strongest satellite states. Strict, controlled, closed off. But by 1989, people were done with it. Mass protests erupted. People demanded freedom of movement, free speech, real elections. And then the unthinkable happened. On November 9th, 1989, a confused East German official announced on TV that citizens could cross to the west. Crowds rushed to the checkpoints. Guards panicked. No one had clear orders. Then, slowly, they opened the gates. People climbed the Berlin Wall, broke pieces off, danced on top of it. For the first time in 28 years, East and West Berliners hugged each other freely. It was a moment that electrified the world, a symbol of the Cold War, gone in a night. And the Soviet Union, it didn't send tanks. It didn't stop it. It couldn't stop it. The empire was losing its grip. Once the Berlin Wall cracked, the entire Soviet system started falling apart like dominoes. Across Eastern Europe, communist governments collapsed almost overnight. Poland, free elections. Hungary, open borders. Czechoslovakia, the Velvet Revolution. Romania, dictator Ceausescu executed on Christmas Day. Bulgaria, Albania, East Germany, all gone. And the Soviet Union couldn't stop any of it. Inside the USSR itself, republics demanded independence. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, left first. Then Georgia, Armenia, Ukraine, Moldova, Kazakhstan, an avalanche of nations breaking free. This wasn't a revolt. This was an exodus. People everywhere were saying, we don't want Moscow controlling us anymore. We want our country back. We want freedom, not slogans. Gorbachev tried to reform things, to stabilize things, to hold the Union together peacefully. But he didn't see the truth. He had opened the door, and the entire empire was walking out. In 1991, the communist hardliners had enough. They saw Gorbachev's reforms as surrender. They wanted the old system back. Control, fear, obedience. So, on August 19, 1991, they launched a coup. They cut off Gorbachev's communication, locked him in his vacation home in Crimea, declared a state of emergency, rolled tanks into Moscow, announced they were saving the country. But something unexpected happened. The people said no. Crowds filled the streets. Citizens blocked tanks with their bodies. And at the front stood Boris Yeltsin, leader of the Russian Republic. Standing on top of a tank, megaphone in hand, "You do not have the right to rule. The people decide." He became an instant hero. The soldiers refused to shoot civilians. The coup collapsed in 3 days. What the coup really did? It destroyed whatever legitimacy the Soviet government still had. It proved the system was dead. After the failed coup, things moved fast. Too fast for anyone to stop. Republic after republic declared independence. Factories shut down. Food disappeared from shelves. Inflation exploded. The military fractured. Borders dissolved. The entire system was collapsing like a building with no foundation. On December 25th, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned live on TV. "I leave my post with anxiety, but also with hope, with faith in you, in your wisdom and strength of spirit. We are heirs of a great civilization, and now it depends on each and every one of us to revive it into a new, modern, and worthy life." Minutes later, the red Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin. For the last time, in its place, the Russian tricolor rose, and just like that, the Soviet Union, a country that stretched across 11 time zones, controlled half of Europe and shaped every global decision for 45 years, was gone. 15 new countries emerged from its ashes. A world superpower dissolved not in war, but in exhaustion, confusion, and silence. With the USSR gone, the United States suddenly stood alone. One superpower, one global leader, no rival, no equal. President George H.W. Bush spoke of a new world order, a world led by democracy, capitalism, and American influence. NATO expanded. Western companies rushed into Eastern Europe. Global markets opened. The 1990s felt like victory, like freedom had won, like the world was finally moving toward peace. But beneath the celebration, a very different story was unfolding. The fall of the USSR didn't create stability. It created a vacuum. Millions woke up in new countries they barely understood. Economies collapsed overnight. Savings evaporated. Corruption spread like wildfire. Organized crime exploded. New leaders battled for power. Old ethnic tensions resurfaced. In Russia, the 1990s became the wild decade. Chaos, poverty, mafia wars, political collapse. In Ukraine, Georgia, the Baltics, new nations struggled to build identity, democracy, and stability. Meanwhile, in the United States, victory created something dangerous: overconfidence. American policymakers believed the world without consequences, without rivals, without limits. This mindset shaped everything that came next. The Gulf War, the Balkan Wars. They could now reshape the war on terror and today's U.S.-Russia tensions. The fall of the Soviet Union wasn't a victory parade. It was a quiet funeral. No fanfare, no treaties, no grand final battle. Just a slow, painful realization that an empire built on ideology, fear, and control couldn't survive the modern world. America became the world's only superpower, but it also inherited a world full of unresolved conflicts, broken economies, and rising nationalism. And Russia, it didn't disappear. It rebuilt, it reorganized, it returned. The Cold War didn't end. It transformed. The world didn't become peaceful. It became unpredictable. And the Soviet collapse wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one, a story the world is still trying to understand.